Welcome to the first episode of ECSD Talk, a new and hopefully long-running interview show hosted by me, Alan Buckler, station manager for the Ellenville Central School District's very own radio station 107.9 WELV. This new show will be available in 3 locations. It will be broadcast on Spectrum Channel 20, the district's educational access cable TV station. It'll be available online and on demand on the district's YouTube page, and you can listen to the interviews on WELV, which is not only found at the top of your dial at 107.9 FM, but can also be listened to from anywhere online by going to welvradio.com. The goal of this show is to inform our community about local updates, events, and issues that apply to them. And so let's begin. We are recording this episode in January of 2021, and I'm delighted to be joined today by Vince Napoli, Assistant Superintendent for Business for the Ellenville Central School District. Welcome, Vince.
Hi, Mr. B. How are you today?
I'm very good. Thank you so much for being here with me. And thank you for being my first guest as we embark upon this new show format.
You're welcome.
You've been a very good friend of the station as we've done many radio interviews over the years, but this is our first video and audio interview. How do you feel about that?
I am so excited to be the guinea pig, let's say, the first person to try this with you. I always look forward to our annual budget interviews, and I'm hoping that we'll talk about, because I did bring out my budget calendar. I'm hoping that you'll ask me some of those questions. So yeah, I'm really excited to be here with you.
Awesome. So yeah, the topics I think we're going to cover today will be the budget calendar and the People's Place project, Santa and Talking Turkey, and some capital project updates. So where would you like to begin, Vince?
Yeah, so let's talk about something that already happened in the past. For the last 4 or 5 years, we've partnered with People's Place. They're out of Kingston, and we do multiple events with them throughout the school year. We do Talking Turkey, so people sign up for it. We send out sign-up sheets. People sign up for it's a full Thanksgiving meal. All the food is donated through People's Place, so it's a frozen turkey, all the fixings that come with it. This year there was sweet potatoes, and they were raw from a local farm, spaghetti squash, scallop potatoes, everything that goes with the Thanksgiving meal. Yeah. And then people at the same time can also sign up for Project Santa, and that's only for students or children that are up to the age of 14. And People's Place, through all of their donations, and this is all community donation driven, parents can sign up for all of their children up to the age of 14, and People's Place goes shopping for those children. And then what we do is I go to Kingston with my truck and my trailer, and we've been working this year with Mr. Brown, who's one of our security attendants here, through his local church. He and I went up with our pickup trucks and a trailer, and for Thanksgiving we loaded everything into those vehicles. We drove them over to the local church, and he distributed everything from there. So that was for Talking Turkey and for Project Santa. And this year, the school alone, we serviced over 114 families, and then over at the church, they handled another 60 or 80 more. So we'll call it 175, 200 families were taken care of between the two of us. In the past, we've handled through the school. Everything was done through either the business office. The first year we did it through a middle school cafeteria. And I used to post pictures up on our website through the business office, but we would have volumes of bags of presents for kids. There was food everywhere, and the business office, we would distribute everything as people would come in and pick it up throughout the day. Going through the church, we were able to do it over a period of a couple of days. And then they also had volunteers over at the church, which took some of the load off of us here at the school. This was one of our biggest successes that we had, our years in the last, like I said, 4 or 5 years doing it. I had kids over there helping us for community service, unloading my truck and bringing stuff into the church, and community members were volunteering, handing out the food. This was a big time of people in the community, really, the local Ellenville community helping to distribute everything to People's Place, and then it was People's Place that put it all together. Christine Hine up there, who's their executive director, her and her team I don't know how they pull it off every year, but it is great. And then throughout the rest of the year, we do something that's called Bag Spring Break Hunger. So we do bags of food that go home with the kids over spring break. We started off here years ago through the food bank of New York. We had the backpack program, but money for the grant kind of ran dry. So I worked with Christine up at People's Place, and we do things like that throughout the school year. Also, we try to give parents who want the the food, the snacks, to sign up for it. Then we give it to them. So that's the big put a smile on your face thing that we did this year, was through People's Place.
That's great. And you mentioned the district's been working with People's Place for 4 or 5 years. Obviously, this year was a different year than previous years, thanks to the COVID-19 pandemic. How did that affect things? How did it maybe make things better or worse in terms of more people using it, harder to distribute? How is it affected?
We had about the same number of people sign up, and I don't really have a statistic on whether it was the same people or we had new people sign up. But I know that over at the church they had more people sign up through, and Mr. Brown has a food pantry over there, but this really added a lot more, direct pass off to a whole family rather than people signing up for the food pantry. To answer your question, it was a little bit more complicated just because of the logistics of when we could go to Kingston and whether we could have lots of people showing up to volunteer. I used to have lots of hands up there to help me load the trucks.
Right.
And while we had people volunteering, it was harder to work together, only because you really wanted to try to stay away from each other. But everyone wore their masks. We all did the right thing. So on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being really different than it has been in the past, and 1 being almost the same, I would say it was like a 1.5. It really wasn't all that different.
Oh, good. So that's awesome. So that sounds like a very positive story from the last 12 months. You want to do some capital project updates, or you want to save those for after the budget?
You read my mind, because I was trying to guess where you were going to go next. And I said, I hope he goes to the capital project. So last year, the capital project, we had the vote. The capital project passed. We have sent the specs for the roofs up to state education for review. We're hoping to get that approved pretty quick. And then once that's approved, we'll be able to hopefully go out to bid this spring, probably pretty soon, so that we can get our roofs taken care of this summer. And then that'll be nice. And then the rest of the project will fall into place as per the schedule that we had in place when we went out for the vote. Mm-hmm. So, there's ball field repairs, there's the auditorium upgrade, we have the roofs. I'm trying to do a quick peek as to what I had. We had some parking lot site work that was going to be done. I don't have the list off the top of my head, but everything that's listed on our school's website, and I've got a whole section under capital projects. People can dive into that if they want a refresher. But we're moving along. That's what I really want to talk about. We're hoping to get the roofs done this summer, and then it'll be done over this summer, and then 2 more summers after that, and then we'll be done.
Yeah, well, you read my mind. I was going to say, if people want to learn more or learn the schedule that we're hopefully following fairly closely, they can go to the district website. Where would they find the capital project information?
Under the business office, or the way I do it is I go to our homepage. I just do a search for capital projects at the link that's in the upper right-hand corner. And that's how I find anything that I'm looking for, whether it's menus or food service or whatever it is. We have so much information that we have to get out to people that it's kind of hard to go looking for it. So I just use the search feature, and it seems to work out pretty good.
I will have one follow-up question on that before we go into the budget process, and that is, again, similarly how to the last topic, COVID-19 has changed everything. So obviously, it's good to know that the capital project is still moving forward despite the pandemic. Like, it didn't stop, but I imagine it may have been affected by the pandemic. What can you talk to that? How has the pandemic affected the capital project, if at all?
Yeah. So hopefully favorably, believe it or not. And we won't know until we get into it. But what I'm hearing is that while residential construction is picked up quite a bit, schools and commercial construction work has slowed down quite a bit. So while we've been, we were a little bit ahead of the curve. So we've been having meetings, and we can do that either virtually or small meetings to come in and talk about individual things. Like you were involved in a meeting with the auditorium upgrade and also the studio, and we did a lot of electronic sharing. So we're hoping that the climate for the bidding for the contractors is going to be favorable for us, that the pricing will come in competitive. And then I'm also seeing that because interest rates are so low and they're staying low, we're hoping that the borrowing, when we go out to borrow for this capital project of $19 million, the rates will be favorable. The last capital project, we were at 4.5%. That's actually very good. But some of the bonds right now are out there at 2.5%. So, even when people are going out to refinance or their mortgage their house, they're getting unbelievably low rates. So in the long term, the way you borrow for a school is it's called it's a bond. It's like for a homeowner, it would be a mortgage loan, but this is a bond, and it's over 15 years. So the principal and interest are computed over 15 years. And if the interest rate's really low, I mean, that's a sweetheart of a deal. Like if you're going to go buy a car today, if you can buy a car at 0% interest, why would you put any money down? It's free money for the 3, 4, or 5 years of borrowing, to buy that car. So if the interest rates are low, that we can pay for more now than we would if interest rates like back on, I don't know how far back, back when I started my career back in the 80s, interest rates were 10%.
Wow.
So, it would cost a lot of money to borrow $19 million over the 15 years.
Yeah, big time, big time. All right. So speaking of money and interest rates, why don't we move on to the budget process? As you mentioned right at the top, this is quite often why we meet every year, a couple of times to talk. It used to be on the old radio show at WEOV Talk, and now we're in this new format. So we are in a new year, 2021, which means you are ready to begin I know you've begun it, but the public is ready to see some presentations, as is the Board of Education, on the 2021 to 2022 school year budget. So tell us, where are we with that process and what's coming up in the next few weeks and months?
Sure. And so I'm going to call you out a little bit on something that you just did, only because Justine and I did the same thing. We really had to think about the year 2021. I remember Prince rocking to 1999. We're going to party like it's 1999, and I'm having trouble writing, 1/7/2021, throwing the 21 end of it. It's just I'm having trouble with that number for some reason. So anyway, I have my cheat sheet here. I actually have my calendar, the budget calendar, which is listed on the business office budget calendar, or the budget page for 21-22. So as you said, and in fact, your department has already gotten to me their budget for 21-22, and all the buildings, with the exception of a couple things that we're still tweaking, have gotten me their budget. So the development of the budget spreadsheet is almost done. We're waiting on some other things from the state and to talk about BOCES and where our special education students are going to be placed. So having all that behind me, our first budget workshop is February 16th. And that will be 5:30 to 8:30. And that's our biggest, that's like a 3-hour budget workshop. We always don't go to the 3 hours. We leave 3 hours just in case we have a lot of questions or technical glitches or whatever. But then after that, all the budget workshops after that are going to be included with a regular board meeting, which is kind of something new this year. We're trying to have the same number of meetings, but dovetail it along with board meetings. But the board meetings on those nights, just for your note, will start at 7 o'clock rather than 7:30, because the budget workshop will start at 7.
Right.
That would be on February 23rd, March 9th. So that's the only real major change that you guys over in the studio need to be made aware of, that we're starting at 7 o'clock on those nights. And like I said, this document is up on our district's website, which you have access to as well. So you kind of plan for that too when you plan on doing the video recordings of our budget workshops and our budget meetings.
Right. And I have a detailed question, but before we get to that, so the process is there's the big 3-hour presentation on February the
16th. 16th. Yeah.
By the 2 half-hour sessions, hopefully prior to the next two board meetings. Then the budget, the public and the board gets a chance to deliberate. And then when does the board choose to approve or deny the budget?
So that's a really good question. I have it scheduled for April 21st. That's the date that the board would officially adopt the district budget calendar, as well as the not the calendar, the district budget, as well as the BOCES budget. And then there's a gap, and there's a number of days that have to happen between that and the actual budget vote, and that's written in the law. And then on May 18th of 2021, that's when the budget vote actually happens. And we're hoping right now that we'll have the the voting machines up and running. We'll be able to have people come in person and vote. That's kind of the plan right now, to do it the way that we would normally do it.
Yeah, I mean, that reminds me of over the summer of last year, 2020, there was the large absentee ballot count. That was for the budget, correct? And the Board of Education vote, right? That was all done by absentee ballot?
Right, and we had to physically count them. And we had teams of people. I don't know if you remember filming it, but we had
broadcasted.
Yeah, and you broadcast it live. We had tables and teams counting, double counting, and then a collector, and then someone that after they collected all the ballots, and then somebody tallied them all together. It was a big production. We were really nervous about it, but it really went off pretty well.
Yeah.
Our secretarial staff, they did a great job coming together as a team, and everyone found their niche and their talent and what they were good at. It was well oiled. Yeah.
And I guess now that we've gone through that, we'll be better prepared for whatever it looks like it will be in the summer or in the spring of 2021, a few months away, when the public gets to vote on the budget. I imagine absentee ballots will still be a thing, but depending on where we are, right, they may be able to come in person and vote as well.
Right. Absentee ballots will always be available. I shouldn't say always. I don't know about you, but I don't like those words always and never. Right, because it's never always, and it's always never, right? So, but we're hoping that we'll be able to have in-person voting, but no one has said anything about doing away with absentee ballots ever, because people still, whether you're in the military and you're overseas, or your job is relocated just somewhere, or you physically can't make it to the voting place, you need to be able to vote absentee.
Yeah, and so my last, but my biggest question on the budget process is going to be, how has the pandemic affected it? So in previous years, when we'd have this kind of conversation, I would usually ask you things like, is there going to be a budget decrease or an increase or a 0% increase? And you always have good answers in terms of where we are and why we're there. I'm going to ask you basically the same kind of question. Where are we and why? And how has the pandemic affected the projected school budget amount?
So I'm going to hold off on a lot of those answers. So A, so that I can come back and see you again, but B, because I don't have a lot of those answers yet.
Yeah.
Because while the governor did hold back some of our state aid, it hasn't been as much as he said it would be.
Yeah.
But there's always the chance that he could still withhold the 20% that he said he was going to. So I really don't. I can't give you a prediction on that.
Well, I think what you're referring to is something that just pops up was, the previous budget that was passed, it was passed, but then under the kind of, with the footnote that the funding of the 2020-2021 budget could be adjusted mid-year, right, by the governor's office,
right,
depending on how state funds were right now. So I guess as of right now, has the district lost any money that they were supposed to get for the current budget we're in right now?
We have, but it's not as much as of today, it's not as much as we thought it would be. So if you go to the 2021 budget document, and where people would want to focus would be under the state aid page, we anticipated, because this is what they did to us years ago for the gap elimination adjustment, and a long time prior to that. I don't know, that was long before I started my career here. I forget when it was, but the governor has adjusted state aid mid-year. We went under the assumption that there is going to be a 20% across the board decrease or withholding of state aid. So we had an adjustment in our budget to act accordingly, or to be able to respond accordingly.
Right.
We haven't lost all that 20%, but we have lost some of it.
Yeah, and I guess from what you were saying before is that we don't know at the moment necessarily what the amount is going to be for the following school year, whether it has to be a 0% or a decrease of some amount. We don't know yet, right?
We don't know. That's kind of something that we're putting together right now, because we don't know what's going to happen with state aid or any type of government, federal government stimulus back when the gap elimination adjustment started back in 2009, 2010. We had a stimulus package. We had a couple of years of ARA funding that helped us cover our budget gap, so we wouldn't have to levy it to the taxpayers. The federal government helped us carry some of that burden for a couple of years, and then once the economy started to pick back up, then they slowly pulled that back.
Yeah, I guess though, in some ways, I know it's obviously unprecedented times and things that we're all going through. So certainly when it comes to developing this next budget, it's unprecedented what you're going through. But at the same time, you do have past experience with. I remember the great analogy you said is trying to build your budget, but on like a table that's always moving, because you're not quite sure. Like in all years prior to now, you're never quite sure exactly what the number is going to be until like very close to when it's going to happen. So as you're formulating it, you have to kind of think, I think it's going to be in this kind of zone, but it could be anywhere within that kind of range. So you have prior experience of dealing with unfinalized numbers, shall we say, except now, whereas before that might have been like 2 out of the 10 aspects, it's all across the board probably, right?
You're right. And we usually have the governor's budget by the end of January, and then the legislature gets us it like around March or April, so that at least we have an idea of what we think our state aid is going to be. I can remember when Superintendent Wiles was the business official, and prior to her, we wouldn't know what the governor's or what the legislative budget was until June, till the middle of the summer, and that made people's lives very uneasy. And I can remember we had some teachers that most of them have retired now, but back in the 70s and 80s, where they would lose their job, and then they would be recalled because the state would then come up with the funding. And that happened. I remember one teacher who retired from here that I became very good friends with, that he held the record for like the number of times that he was excess. I think it was like 7 times over the course of his career, because of the way that the state did their budget. And within the last 15 years or so, the budget has been on time, which is helpful to us, knowing what our funding's going to be, so we can plan.
Do you still hope to receive the governor's budget end of the month, or are you not thinking that's going to happen?
I don't know anything different, so I'm going to be optimistic and and hope and assume that I will get his budget by the end of January, and then we'll get the legislative budget soon thereafter. So yeah, I'm optimistic.
That's awesome. That's good to hear, Mr. Napoli. Yeah. All right. Anything else you want to bring up on today's interview show?
No, I think I'm good. I really enjoyed this. This was a great format for me, and hopefully the video comes out pretty good.
I hope so. So thank you, and obviously, as you mentioned, we'll do a follow-up interview as the weeks and months go by and we get into budget season and beyond. We'll have another meeting to talk about probably the upcoming. Probably in the spring, when it'll be like just before the budget vote, to let the public know when the vote's happening, all that kind of stuff.
Right, probably sometime around April. So if we can plan on sometime around April, that would be great.
Great. So that brings us to the end of today's show. Thank you to my guest, Mr. Vince Napoli, Assistant Superintendent for Business for the Ellenville Central School District. I believe your number is 647. What's the phone number people should call to reach you at, Vince?
0115.
Okay, and it's vnapoli@ecs.k12.ny.us for your email. I've been your host, Alan Buckler, and if you'd like to get in touch with me, then you can call me at the high school TV and radio studio at 647-0135, or you can email me at abuckler@ecs.k12.ny.us. Until next time, goodbye for now.